Hey YouTube, DIYJunkie369 here today. It is now week 3, so this is my update on the weight loss video blog. I have notes today because I have a lot of stuff to talk about with Paleo versus Keto, and hopefully that's not too distracting. I'll keep looking down for that. So, as of today, my weight is 290.3 pounds. That's 35.3 for BMI. And about 14 pounds lost since I've started. For this week, I met my calorie goal every day and was actually under it just a little bit, which is what I like. That's how I keep the weight loss going. And I met my goal of 100 ounces of water each day. And actually, if you watched all the videos, you noticed that I shifted this. I was doing 128 ounces, but that turned out to be a little bit difficult and excessive, so I bumped it back to just 100 ounces of water a day. And then I met my 10,000 step goal each day, which also means that in my 2019 challenge of 2019 miles in this year, I am currently at 66.9 miles, and I only need 66.4 miles at this point. And then as for sleep, my goal is 8.5 hours. I did not meet that any night really, except for Friday and Saturday night. That's something I'm going to continually have to work on, but pretty busy person, and sleep seems to be at the bottom of my list, unfortunately. So this week was nice because I started my Garmin Couch to 5K program, which I really enjoyed. Went running 3 times this week, about 2 miles each day, and that's run and walk, so it's not anything fast or difficult. And on this program, there's non-Garmin programs. You can just look it up, C25K usually, and it'll show you the program. And you you walk for about 5 minutes, warm up, and then run for a minute, and then walk for so long, and you continue that. And then each day it gets progressively harder, and by the end of 9 weeks, you'll be surprised because you'll actually be running 5K, and it won't be all that difficult for you. So, as I mentioned before, I'm talking about Keto and Paleo, just a little bit, a quick overview. And I had done Paleo before, and unfortunately, I didn't really stop doing Paleo. I kept kind of eating in that manner, but I went back to consuming too many calories. I think it was mainly because I was raised like you need to clear your plate, and when you're going out and when other people are feeding you, that's the worst thing you can do because they're not necessarily giving you correct portion sizes. And if you've overeaten often before, your stomach expands and your full valve or switch kind of gets reset, and then once you go back to eating normal amounts of portions, that really doesn't go back to telling you you're full. Like, it'll never be the same. Your stomach's usually used to being like full above the max. Well, now this is your new level, and from studies that I've heard about, it never goes back down to a normal level, unfortunately. Unfortunately, Paleo has been called a fad diet. It's been tied to Atkins, and part of it, I think, comes down to there's not a set diet out there. People are kind of just aiming, kind of adjusting their diet to do what they want it to do, and that's a good thing in a way because not everybody's the same, but at the same time it's kind of a pain because people go out researching what Paleo is and they get a whole bunch of different answers. And I think that causes a lot of frustration and myths about it. For example, I mean, there's a group out there that's closer to Atkins where they're consuming a whole bunch of meat, and it's kind of the eat as much bacon as you want diet. Well, unfortunately, to me, bacon isn't Paleo because it's processed food. It has nitrates and sugars added to it, and those are actually pretty bad for you, and I'll cover that more in depth in a video next week. Typically, if you don't know, the diet includes fruits, vegetables, nuts, berries, roots, and meats. Basically anything you could hunt or gather. and it unfortunately excludes dairy products, which are for the most part good for you, and grains. And that one's kind of I could argue either way. There's a lot of people saying, oh, you should eat grains, and then there's a group of people, mostly those following the keto diet and paleo, saying grains are bad for you and you shouldn't eat them. And I'll go into more depth on which I believe in my second video and try to cover that. It also excludes sugars, which are definitely bad for you. Legumes, that one I'll have to do some research on them. I remember vaguely something about them being a anti-nutrient. That's what the word I'm looking for. Also try to avoid processed oils. Salt, which is weird because if you look up a bunch of paleo recipes, they're using salt, and that's a topic of great debate among paleo followers. Alcohol, which most of you probably aren't going to like, and coffee, other processed foods. Basically anything that's ready-made, lunch meat, stuff like that. If you can't hunt it, catch it, or gather it from the field, you probably shouldn't be eating it. And that's kind of where paleo is nice, because it's focused on this really healthy style of food. Like you're going out and getting free-range stuff that's been grass-fed, the healthier types of food that aren't processed and have a whole bunch of antibiotics in them and stuff like that. If you need to lose weight with paleo, you can eat roots such as sweet potatoes, and then there's some debate whether a potato is paleo or not. But if you're trying to lose the weight, stay away from the starchier foods in paleo. So you'd kind of be focused mainly on other vegetables and fruits, not bananas, not sweet potatoes really, and not potatoes. And then as for corn, most people actually consider that a grain instead of a vegetable, and because it's high starch content in it, and it should be avoided either way. And then what confuses a lot of people is on paleo, fat isn't bad. Like, you're going to be consuming a lot of fat, and recently, especially coming up through the 80s, people have been keyed into, oh, avoid fat, that's what's unhealthy for you, and they started making low-fat foods. Well, to make those foods, to get the fat out of them, they're adding in a whole bunch of sugar, and then people weren't losing weight anyway on them. And really, the sugar, it's a simple sugar, real easy for your body to take that sugar and convert it into stored energy, which is fat, and it makes you fat. Fat, on the other hand, is actually fairly difficult to burn, and it's not easily converted. Even though it is fat, when your body's consuming it and breaking it down, it's not that easily converted into fat for your body. And then protein is the hardest to burn, and it's kind of the same way inside your body. Like, if you have carbohydrates available, you're going to burn those first, and then if you're short on carbohydrates and go into ketosis, you start burning fat, and then as a last resort, your body is going to start burning your protein source or your muscle. And part of in weight loss, what you'll see happen is you'll lose quite a bit of fat, but you're also going to lose a little bit of muscle and burn that up in the process. The fat is important because it's actually what makes people feel full. And that's part of the problem with people on like diets that are really low fat, is they're always going to feel full, and then they're going to consume a lot of calories and eat too much. As for macros for paleo, there's really not anything set in stone, especially because it's a bunch of people fitting this to their lifestyle and how they want it to work for them. But a general rule, you should be consuming about 50% fat, 30% protein, and then 20% carbohydrates, and that's by weight in grams. And then compared to keto, keto is a high-fat, adequate protein, low-carbohydrate diet. And it's sort of the same, but it isn't. The diet basically is there to force your body to burn fat rather than carbohydrates. Normally the carbohydrates contained on food are converted into glucose, which is transported around the body and particularly important in functions for the brain. However, if there are little carbohydrates in the body, the liver converts fat into fatty acids and ketone bodies. And that's the important part of the keto diet. The ketones pass into the brain and replace glucose as energy. This can reduce epileptic seizures, and a lot of doctors use this diet to treat such. And then there's also benefits in this as far as naturally treating those with diabetes, especially type 2 diabetes. Some of the side benefits happen to be weight loss, blood sugar control, and several other benefits that I didn't bother writing in my notes. If you want to, you just search keto, look it up, and go read it. Similar to paleo, keto really cuts out all grains. I mean, they take it even a bit further as far as carbohydrates go. You track net carbs, and you're not supposed to get over 20 to 25 a day. And, part of this that means you can't eat pretty much any fruit, because even though fruit has fiber, the level isn't high enough to cancel out the level of carbohydrates that they have. So, cuts out the naturally occurring sugars and fruits, and all tubers, no potatoes whatsoever. Any carbs should be limited to mostly coming from vegetables, which vegetables have carbs, but they also have a really high fiber content, and those net carbs usually on a good vegetable will be about 5 maybe for 1 or 2 cups of that vegetable. And then nuts, and unlike paleo, it lets you drink dairy or consume dairy. The macros for it are pretty easy to find. That's 70% fats, so really heavy emphasis on the fats, which is going to help you feel full. And then 25% protein, and then only 5% carbohydrates. And that's why it's important to get that 20 to 25 gram net carb range. That's how you limit your carbohydrates. And mainly all of those are coming purely through vegetables. And as I said before, this diet normally uses net carbs, which is just your carbohydrates in grams minus the fiber in grams. And you subtract one from the other, and that gives you your net carbs. I could kind of see combining the two, especially since there's nothing set in stone for paleo, and some paleo followers kind of move towards this direction. They add in a little bit of dairy, even though dairy is strictly non-paleo, which I'll explain more on later in the second video. But they'll take it in the form of grass-fed butter, hard cheeses, and yogurt. And what's important about those is they have very little lactose in them. Because a lot of people that kind of go towards paleo find out they might have a mild allergic reaction to dairy and not even realize it. And then also you want to avoid lactose, which is a sugar that's easy for your body to digest. Well, it's not easy for your body to digest, but it's a quick form of energy that is easy to turn, for your body to turn into fat cells for energy storage if you're consuming too much of it. The only problem I have with keto is it would be really difficult for me after doing paleo to cut back on the fruit side of stuff to get those net carbs down under 25. And consuming fruit and a whole bunch of berries, if you go do the research on how much like a handful of berries has in sugar versus fiber, it really, really quickly, just like 2 handfuls would be enough to take you outside of ketosis. And I would find that really frustrating, but I'll look at maybe adjusting the paleo diet for me a little bit and seeing if I can get towards that ketosis further. So that's all I have for right now, kind of covering the two. I'll go more in depth into Paleo on my second video and describe what I'm doing, what kind of some of the rules are, how the rules are being bent, what the arguments against Paleo are, and why they call it a fad diet, even though I'm not really sure it should be considered that. Thanks for watching, and hope to see you next week. Keep up the weight loss.